as far as his practice design, he would build in time for his players to independently work on what they need to work on during practice, not just before practice or after practice, because I hear a lot of coaches say, oh, well, we let them do stuff at the beginning of practice. Well, that's great, but maybe during practice, try it that way. So these are just some of the things we're going to talk about. What is autonomy supportive coaching behaviors and application? So for example, provide opportunities for players to take initiative and independently work. So can you schedule free time during practice? Again, the keyword during, or in the middle, or wherever, to have them work on a self-determined area of strength or weaknesses. So I'm going to talk about how I did it, and I'll actually show an example. Give players a choice within boundaries. So let the athletes choose an activity from a prepared list. Again, it's planned. It's not just, hey, here's a list of activities, do it. No, in your mind, you have a prepared list of activities and you give your players the choice of what they want to do. The third one is giving rationale for tasks. A lot of times as coaches, we tell them that they have to do it this way because we told them so. And what that does sometimes is it creates a top-down approach, and it actually can be traumatic. So if we can explain the advantage of doing a certain thing a certain way, and we kind of give rationale as to why it's important that they're doing it, that goes a long way for them to develop some autonomy and some competence. Just listen, non-defensively to their feedback. I think as coaches, when a player kind of questions something, sometimes we already get on our guard and we're thinking that they're not accepting what we're trying to teach them. So I think it's really important that you acknowledge their feelings, say, I hear you, appreciate it, and let's take that in consideration. So how can we integrate that? How do we solicit athlete input? So athletes, again, they need to know that you care about them, because they won't care what you know until they know that you care. And in order to do that, though, they have to be able to go to you and say, hey, coach, I think we need to work on kind of how our back four and our goalkeeper and our six work a little bit better in the defending third, because maybe you think it's going well, but maybe they don't. So can you solicit their input as to what they think we need to work on? And then avoid controlling behaviors. Recognize that a skill can be done in many ways. And so I'm going to kind of go through all of these types of things here on this slide. And again, I apologize for the graininess of the slide, but it's again from the textbook, and I'll reference it here at the end. So I'll pause if there's any questions in the chat box. If not, then I'll just move on.
We're good to go, Vince.
Okay. All right. So the first one, providing opportunities for initiative and independent work. So like I mentioned, Gregor Townsend at the beginning. So he called it great by choice. So basically he told players that they have X amount of time to be great by choice, to work on what they think they need to work on. They can do it by themselves. They can do it with a teammate. They can do it with teammates. You give them boundaries, but you give them that independent time to kind of work on what they think they need to work on in the middle of practice, or maybe it's after a warm up, or maybe it's right before you play the end game, just to kind of give them a little breather, and then you play the end game. So he called it great by choice. There's a college program in Michigan that calls it pro time. I presented this one time, and there was a college coach in the audience, and he said, Vince, we do this with our college athletes, and we call it pro time. So they get a chance to develop what they think they need to work on, and you give them X amount of time. I've done this with young as 8-year-olds all the way up to the high school kids. I'm also a high school coach. And at first I did it with my high school kids, and they thought, oh, this is different, right? Because I did it right in the middle of practice. I said, all right, you have 10 minutes to work on whatever you think you need to work on. You can do it with a teammates. The only thing I'm going to tell you is you just can't stand and shoot in front of goal, right? Because that's what a lot of kids would like to do. That's what they like to do before in practice too, and right until everyone's arrived. So the result of it was they wanted to continue it, and I let them choose what they wanted to do. So, for example, I had an athlete, a student athlete, and he said, "Coach, I'm not fit. Can I just run?" And I'm like, part of me, I'm like, well, why are you telling your coach you're not fit? But I'm like, sure, yeah, just take someone with you, make sure. And if you just want to run for 10 minutes and do some aerobic work, great, go ahead. You got 10 minutes. They loved it. And we started integrating it every 2 weeks into practice. And so I'll just show you a video. I hope you can see this on the screen. There's no sound. Can you see it all right on the screen?
We can see the picture. It just hasn't started rolling.
I haven't clicked on it yet. I just want to make sure you can see it. So this was an ODP event that I did in Indianapolis, where I live. It's Grand Park, beautiful facility. So these are ODP kids in the, I want to say they're in the 09 age group. So we had stations because we had such a huge group. And in the middle station where I'm at, I have a group of kids and I'm giving them the chance to practice independently on their own. So I gave them, after I gave them the spiel, you got X amount of time to work on what you think you want to work on. You work on with by yourself. And I gave them ideas. For example, you can juggle. You can play soccer tennis. If you want to play soccer tennis with your buddies, if you feel like your first touch, you need to get better with your first touch. You can just work on bending balls. So as I play the clip, you can kind of see them here. I just told them what was going on. And it takes a second for them to kind of get organized. And you'll kind of see some kids, like you'll see there are two kids here. They're going to get together and they're going to strike the ball kind of back and forth here in a minute. So as this is playing, so I'm just going to see if I don't know if I can pause or not. On the right, so there's the ball that just got to me, and I'm going to knock it to, just going to let this young man knock another ball back to him. So there's two kids on the far right, and what they decided to do was try to work on bending balls. So at first, they're just striking balls back and forth, which is fine. And they're just trying to learn how to bend it. And I talked to them. I said, hey, so if you want to work on bending balls, see if you can just get the ball to spin sideways. And I'll talk about what external focus of attention. Here's a minute. You can see some kids are just juggling. Some kids are just kind of knocking it back and forth. And some kids are just kind of taking it easy. And that's okay. That's all right to give them that time. But as we went on, and the research has shown, actually, when you get players in pairs like this, and you just kind of let them practice back and forth, what they're doing right there, I don't know if you saw, but that young man you can see the ball swerving. You can see his toe up and his heel down after he struck the ball. What's happening, kind of not directly, is I'm watching the other person strike the ball and how they strike it. And maybe if they did it well, okay, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to try and do that too. So there's a lot of self-improvement going on here, which really at the end of the day, that's what we want our kids to do. We want them to self-improve. We want them to take initiative on their own to get better. So they normally don't have time to do this in practice. They don't have time to do the home. I mean, heck, the kids are more and more busy these days. For us to expect them to get in the backyard, yes, it's wonderful. It'd be great. But the reality of it is not many kids do. So can we build in some time in practice to let them work on what they think they want to work on? The high school kids I did it with, they played soccer, tennis. We have a game called horseshoes. They know how to play those games. So I also used to teach them some street games. Some backyard type games that they can do on their own in this period of time. Let me see. Sorry about that. Some reason. Sorry about that. Froze up.
No problem. Vince, quick question.
Yep.
How much time would you allocate for the pro time or the grade by choice time?
Yeah, so it just varies. I think it's a good question. For me, it varies on the age. It varies on the ability of the players and the kind of the motivation of the players. So when I've done it with 8-year-olds, I gave them 3 to 5 minutes. That's it. I just gave them 3 to 5 minutes. And it was pretty cool because someone just worked on dribbling moves. But when they're older, the high school kids and the college kids, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops is usually what we do. But that's kind of what the range is. But again, it just depends on a lot of factors. But the other thing it can do too is while those kids are independently practicing, you can go around and you can just talk with the kid, ask how their life is going, ask what's happening. You can set up for another activity if you feel like, because I know sometimes we go and practice with one thing in mind, it's not working, so we have to change on the fly. So maybe we got to change an activity based on where the players are at. But so that's kind of the question there. I hope that I answered that. But basically, it's a range. It depends on the ability. It depends on the age. It depends on, is the weather. If it's raining and pouring and nasty, well, then I'm probably not going to do it that day. So it just depends on just some variables. So the next thing is providing choice within boundaries. So as coaches, we go in with the plan. And some of you are club coaches and you get paid a lot of money by your parents or your college coaches or your high school coaches. So you always go in with the practice plan. And I actually listened to a high school coach once in Massachusetts. And he said, Vince, he said, sometimes what I do is I just have a stack of activities and I lay them out on the ground and then the kids pick which ones they want to do. But they relate to something we need to work on. So when it says within boundaries, that's what we mean. In other words, it's a prepared list. It's not just, okay, hey, do you want to play soccer tennis or do you want to play the 3v3 flying changes game, which they love, right? So it's purposeful. I'll give you an example. So as a team, maybe you ask them what they need to work on to improve. And so we have a list of activities ready to go and allow them to pick. It might be, we just have a list of activities related to our game model. So we for example, we know we want to work on our build up from the defending third into the middle third based off of our game model. So I'm going to have a prepared list of activities going in that I'm going to let them choose from. And then maybe it's a list of scenarios. So here's something I do with my high school team. So we had scenarios and I laminated these cards. I'll show you what those look like here. I created activities. I put them in small groups. Each group had a scenario. It could be, you have 7 minutes to go, you're down by a goal, and you have to basically score a goal off of a corner kick. So the scenario is you get to create your own corner kick, and you also have to basically, you'll go out and play it. So we went through all these different scenarios. We're up a goal where it's 5 minutes left. We went through, we read them all, and as a team, they chose which one they wanted to work on. So this is the one they wanted to work on. And I asked them why, and they said, well, coach, we haven't scored off a corner yet. Okay, that's fair enough. So I gave them, this is one of the scenario cards. And I'm more than happy to share these situations with the coaches on this webinar if they want me to. I can send them to you and you can pass them along if you want to. But so basically it's just they're down 1-2, second half. Their mission is to score off a corner kick. They have to earn a corner kick. So in other words, you play for 7 minutes. They have to earn one, which is hard. So they have to earn it. And the defending team also has a task. But what I told them before this scenario, I said, okay, if you're the attacking team, go design your corner. Go design your corner kick, and let's see what you come up with. Because sometimes as coaches, we have these set pieces in mind, but they might have something that they've seen that, wow, my goodness, that'll work. That'll work for us. And then you do the same thing with the defending side. You say, all right, defending unit, how are you going to defend this corner? Is there anything that's going to change in the last 7 minutes versus at the beginning of the game? So it's just giving them a little bit of empowerment to come up with, their own type of result. So I did this recently. This is what I did at the convention. At the convention, I just told the kids, all right, you have a choice between an attacking activity that's kind of group oriented or an attacking activity that's more individually oriented. So, and what I did is, I don't know if you can see, there's a knot on here, but I laminated them. You can see they're printed out nice and big, and I put them in groups, and I literally I just laid them on the ground, and the kids just kind of talked about them, and I'd had to explain it a little bit, but they gave them a chance to choose which one they wanted to do. So, but they were both related to attacking, and if they chose either one, I was good with it as a coach. So it's planned, it's purposeful. You have in mind what you want to do. And then the same thing on the defending side. So this might be more of a defending game. Maybe it's a pressure cover game, because I feel like maybe we got to work on pressure cover, but I'm gonna give them a chance to play this game if they want to, or we can work on a little pressing game that I have here called the offset goals. So their choice. And again, like I showed you, I just laminate them. That's all I do. And and it's great because now I have them, right? I have them for a long time. So this is kind of what that coach did in Massachusetts. He laminated the activities. The kids knew the activities. So they were able, yeah, let's do this game. Let's do that game. So I'll pause if there's any questions. And that's kind of how it looks like spread out on my blanket. But anyway, I'll pause if there are any questions or anything there.
No questions at this time.
No questions. Either they're asleep or I'm just going too fast for them. Giving rationale for tasks. I think sometimes as coaches, we say sometimes you must do it this way. Well, that's great. For example, in the back, yeah, we don't want to dribble out of the back. We don't want to play balls flat or square and slow across the back when we're building up. But we have to tell them why, because if we don't tell them why, there's no reason for them to kind of remember it. So we need to kind of give the rationale for tasks. And, because if we don't, then we get these questions, right? And I'm dating myself here with this little graphic. And I know you're probably not old enough to know what show this is. And I would just ask people in the chat box. I will ask people in the chat box what show this is from. Let's see what they come up with. I'm looking at, very good. Peter, excellent. We are dating ourselves. Very good. Yes, it's from Welcome Back, Carter, and that is Arnold Horshack, where he always asks questions after Mr. Carter would give a direction of what to do. Joel, I'm going to go back to your question. Have you done these exercises with them before giving it to them? Yes, some of them, but the ones that I did, for example, at the convention, at the coaching convention, they never saw any of those. So I kind of had explained what they were. But ideally, with your own team, they would have an idea of what those activities are. So I hope I answered your question there, but it depends. And Graham, would you give players an opportunity to discover the rationale in the environment rather than explaining the rationale first? Yes, you can do it that way too. I will say there is a phrase from the inner game of tennis: potential minus interference equals performance. So as coaches, we have to realize every child has potential, every player has potential, every team has potential. We have to reduce or eliminate interference for them to perform. So if interferences, we're not giving the rationale as to why something needs to be done, that creates interference in their mind. So to your point, maybe I'm just going to have them go out and do it and try it. And then if I see some frustration setting in, hey, here's why we're doing this. Or why are we doing this? Why is it important for us to not play balls flat and slow across the back? So again, now we're kind of getting into some rationale, and we're being a little bit more athlete-centered, if you will. So again, there's the what, there's the how, but really when you get to the why, that's the bullseye. So if you can get to the why you're doing things in practice, that goes a long way with the kids. James has asked, have you engaged the parents with this teaching philosophy? Yes, I did actually. So that group of ODP parents, that group of ODP kids, and I don't know if you saw, but in the bleachers, there was these parents, and they were looking like I had 3 heads or whatever, because I'm giving these kids a choice to just kind of practice on their own, and it didn't look like it was really intense. So I went and I just explained it to them. I explained why we're doing it. And they were like nodding their heads. Okay, that makes sense. Because I told them, I said, you know, I'm giving them a chance to practice on their own for 10 minutes. It's not going to do any harm to anyone. And, you know, maybe they'll be a little bit more motivated to do this independently. But James, yes, I did, because I saw the opportunity to do so with that group of parents. And when you do the great by choice, you might have to do that. You might have to say, here's why we're doing it. So acknowledge your feelings and perceptions, you know, and as coaches, right, can we first seek to understand as opposed to being understood? Can we listen? My wife tells me that all the time, honey, I just need you to listen to me for a minute. And so I'm sure a lot of us on here can relate to that comment. But so I think as coaches, we just need to, you know, listen with a purpose, rephrase when you hear something, or repeat back to them what they said. So again, you can process it, or you can just, and you're validating that you heard what they said or what they're asking. So I think it's really important as coaches that we go in with that athlete-centered approach. And that's part of autonomy supportive coaching practice. It's listening to them and giving them autonomy to express themselves. Solicit athlete input. So it could just be, you know, we have a circle of trust, and in that circle of trust, now we're going to ask questions to our players. All right, what's one thing that we need to work on from last week's game? See what they come up with. And they're going to come up with different things, and that's okay, but they need to understand that inside this circle, we're safe. Even outside the circle, we're safe, but definitely inside the circle, let's talk. Let's communicate with each other, and let's voice some concerns if we have some concerns. You know, when it comes to soliciting athlete input, you know, it might just be taking your captains aside and saying, okay, something's not right. We're not scoring off a corner. What do you think we need to do? And kind of give it back to them a little bit, because they'll have some insight on it. So, and you know, even with little kids, for example, I'll go back to providing choice within boundaries. You can do this with youngest 5 and 6 year olds. This past weekend, I was in, where was I? Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I was teaching a course, and I had a group of 6 year olds. And I said, okay, the next game, do you want to play red light, green light? Do you want to play the octopus game or sharks and minnows? And they chose sharks and minnows. I didn't care what they chose, because both games were working on dribbling to get forward. Both of those games were a directional game, dribbling to get forward. I didn't care which one they chose, but I gave them the choice. Now, was it unanimous? No, some kids didn't. So we might have to do both, and that's okay too. So you can do autonomy supportive coaching practices as young as kids as 5 and 6 years old, but just giving them a simple choice of what they want to do. I mean, heck, our parents did it as kids, right? Do you want to do this, or do you want to do that? And they always had, at least my dad did, he always had in his mind, okay, I'm going to see which one he chooses. Right. And it's no different from that when we give kids choice. Avoid controlling behaviors. I think as coaches, we feel like we always have to be the sage on the stage. And can we be more the guide on the side? Can we avoid the controlling behaviors? So I'm going to get into a little bit of what's called external focus of attention in this. So great show, athlete-centered show with Ted Lasso. And this is Roy Kent last season when he took on a young girls team, and it was very much Roy Kent driven, right? It was very much coach driven in a comical way. But I see this a lot with coaches where, they're in charge. If I say march, you say when and how, and it's my way or the highway. So can we avoid those controlling behaviors? And I'm throwing these pictures out, because there's more ways to do something than maybe what we think is the right way. So, for example, the top left-hand corner is a player named Jamal Wilkes. And I grew up I still live in Indiana. Basketball is a religion. It still is, even though we haven't won the national championship since 1987. It's still a religion. And we had a coach named Bobby Knight. And with Bobby Knight, you did say things a certain way. And if you did not, you were out. You were outside. You were gone. Well, that's controlling behavior. Where Jamal Wilkes, his technique when it comes to shooting was just ugly. I mean, he had one of the most ugly shots, because he would bring the ball here and he'd wrap it around his ear and he'd bring it all the way back behind his head, like you see here, and he would fall, and then he would release and follow through. John Wooden, who we played for, didn't try and correct him. I'm sure John Wooden just said, hey, make sure you follow through, point your elbow to the basket. Larry Bird, same way. His feet, from a technical perspective, his feet are pointing the wrong way. Because technically, when you shoot a basketball correctly, your feet should be pointing towards the basket. He used to always contort his body sideways, and he hardly ever followed through. Like, he flicked his wrist. Whenever he shot the ball, it almost like he would stop short of following through. But he had certain things. And then the picture on the left, on the bottom, that's a former Boston Red Sox pitcher named Louis Tiant. And his windup was really, really ugly. It was just ugly, but he was super effective. So the point is that no coach said, no, you can't do it this way. You have to do it this way. They let them do it the way that is comfortable for them, as long as they had certain mechanics in place. So, for example, there's this thing called external focus of attention. So as coaches, a lot of times when we teach technique, we teach it internally. In other words, when you strike the ball, lock your ankle. Put your non-kicking foot next to the ball. Get your head and shoulders over the ball. After you strike it, land on your shooting foot. Those are mechanics. Those are internal mechanics, where if we go back to these people, and the way my dad taught me how to shoot a basketball was, all right, Vince, point your elbow. And when you shoot, you're going to raise your arm. So this is all internal. But then he said something to me that was external. When you shoot it, get arch on the ball. So it's like the McDonald's M. Get arch on the ball and make sure the ball has backspin. So that was the effect of the technique. So with external focus, research that novice players actually are better through external focus of attention. So, for example, we might say for dribbling, hey, when you're dribbling, keep the ball under your knee. So now they can see the effect of the technique. It might be you take smaller, big touches. It might be let your foot hug the ball when you turn it, right? So in other words, keep it nice and tight. Turn your headlights on. In other words, get your head up. The one that I use a lot for the little kids is when you dribble, keep it within a hula hoops of your body. Keep it within a hula hoop of your body. And I asked the kids, what's a hula hoop? And they showed me what a hula hoop was without one. And they were 7 this weekend. I actually asked them. And so what it is, it's a visual for them to see. So when I shot a basketball, if I didn't have enough backspin on the ball, I knew I didn't follow through right, or it didn't come off my fingertips right. So that was internal. So the external focus helped me internally fix what I needed to fix. So for passing, strike the ball in the nose. It's borderline internal. Make your foot as flat as a board. So that's more of an analogy. Make the ball roll as flat as a board. Now that's the effect of the technique, because if they pass the ball and it bounces a little bit, then you know they didn't hit through the middle of the ball. But can they get the ball to roll as flat as a board or make it go fast? That's one thing. Like, for example, when we're talking about, when I talk to the players about striking the ball across the field on the ground, it's got to go fast. You got to make that ball fizz. You got to make that ball go fast. So that's the effect of the technique. So if the ball doesn't go fast, then they know next time, okay, I got to strike it harder. So internally, it helps to fix them, and they figure out their own way. So for example, if you want to bend a ball, just say, hey, when you bend the ball, try to figure out how to make the ball spin sideways. I'm not telling him how to do it. I'm encouraging them to figure out, to explore how to make the ball spin sideways. So they'll figure it out. And that's where that independent practice in the middle of practice allows them to do that, allows them to practice those techniques and experiment externally. So they can see the effect of the technique. If the ball didn't spin sideways, then they know they got to figure out how to make it slice. They got to figure out how to make it spin sideways. Shooting, make the ball go fast. Try to get the ball to have little to no spin. So the opposite of basketball, when you shoot a basketball, you want backspin. When you shoot a soccer ball, we want top spin, or we want to have no spin, right? Then we struck it perfectly. We hit it perfectly. That's external focus of attention. So it's the effect of the technique, not really the internal parts of the technique. When it comes, this is from my mentor and my friend, the late Mike Berticelli, who used to coach at the University of Notre Dame. And, it talks about how Maradona had autonomy playing street soccer, right, to basically experiment and explore, and he had autonomy. And so because he had this autonomy to experiment, explore, well, he became competent, and he also became, and it was also related, right, to what he was trying to do. So as coaches too, can you let the athletes do the work? So this is another part of autonomy supportive coaching practices. Can you build in small group time? So for example, maybe after you talk to them, you say, all right, hey, get in small groups and come up with one thing you're going to do to get better in this next round, this next small-sided game that we're going to play. What's the one thing related to attacking? What's the one thing related to defending? Let them talk about it. Let them come out to it. Build in time for them to reflect. Build in time for them to learn individually or with a teammate. So that's that great by choice. That's that independent time. Dyads is basically pairs, right? So dyads is basically, dyadic learning is partners, pairs. So I'm going to watch how you strike a ball, and I'm going to try and imitate how you do it because you do it really, really well. So I want to do as well as you do. Letting them come up with solutions to the problem. What do you think? What are your thoughts? And there are some times where you have to be the coach and say, I appreciate that thought, but we're going to go with mine. and it's not always, black and white. And I think it's really important that when you assess the session, we do a thing in our courses called SCORE. If you take a U.S. soccer course, it's based off the 5 elements, how you kind of evaluate a session and what went well, what didn't go well, how would you change it. those types of things, reflecting. So we do a thing called score. So S is setup. So with the player, first off, was the session safe? Was the setup safe? Were the goals anchored? All that stuff. The second one where it says, did the players learn just from the session? A really good session or a really good activity is almost, if you couldn't talk, they would learn from it. If you had laryngitis, they would learn through the activity. They would learn through the play. Was the session too confusing, or was it too heavy? Was it too easy? That is, again, an interference. So if something is too, if it's too challenging, or if it's not challenging enough, that's going to create interference in their minds. So therefore, they're not going to be able to perform. So C stands for challenging. O is opportunities. Did they have opportunities to participate? R is realistic. Was realistic to the game, to their age, to their abilities. So this is kind of when you reflect on a session. And educate. So did you apply universal design learning strategies? So those laminated cards that I make, consider as a coach, if you have the capability to do that on some software, laminating some of those that show pressure and cover and what good looks like. Laminate some cards that kind of show what good looks like when we're building out of the back, what spreading out really means. Some kids are visual. Some kids are visual. So you have to, maybe you got to create something visually for these kids. The other thing you got to think about too, and the FA put out a wonderful document, the English FA did, on colorblindness. So now when I do teams, I used to always do 2 pennies, right? 2 colors. So now what I've started doing is I have started, unless the pennies are contrasting enough, I do 1 team of pennies and 1 team not. And it's funny because there are kids that are colorblind. And so if you've got like a team of green and a team that's orange, well, those are really similar colors. So they might be passing to the wrong player, not on purpose, just because they can't distinguish between the two. So that's all universal design learning. How do you come up with these things to help them? Did you ask open-ended questions? Try to start with questions with how. You can't answer yes or no when you start with how. How do you do this? No. How do you do this? Yes. No, it's how do you do this? Or if you start like with when or where, those are also good, but open-ended questions. And did the session, do you think, is going to help with retention? Because what this does is it, as you use autonomy supportive coaching practices, and if the practice is really well designed, you give them some choice in practice, but yet you're still the coach, you're still in charge, you're still planned, they might retain a little bit more. So what I presented, like, for example, the great by choice, some coaches are just scared to do it. What do you mean, giving my 10-year-olds 8 minutes to practice independently? Yeah, it's it could be fearful, but I think sometimes you just have to be brave and believe what you're doing. And I know that every time I do it with a group of kids, they love it. They love it. Now, I don't think you do it every practice. I think you might do it every 3 or 4 practices, or when you feel like you need to. I don't think it's something you do every practice. Gregor Townsend, the Scottish rugby national team coach, he did it every practice. Well, that's because he only got the national team players in a certain amount of times, right? So it wasn't like he had them all the time. And, as a coach, can you, create memories, or do you want to create moments? And some of the best memories I have of my coaches are when they kind of give me some autonomy to work on what I wanted to work on. I had an English coach, and he would always give us some autonomy to work on juggling, right? After we got a drink, we would always juggle. Now, he gave us something that was a boundary, but he gave us that autonomy to do that. And so these are the references. So just so you know, a lot of this is research based. So again, I'm more than happy to share this slide deck with any of you, but I hope I didn't lose anyone on the audience. And but if there are any, I've gone to 2:48, or so you said 55 minutes. I'll answer any questions anybody might have on the idea of autonomy supported coaching practices. But it's basically it's creating an athlete centered environment. And the research is really clear on that one, right? That when coaches create an athlete-centered environment, kids usually do a little bit better, not just in sport, but in other facets of their life too.
And is this something, Vince, you're looking to incorporate in the U.S. soccer coaching courses?
Well, in our courses, United Soccer Coaches, they are in there. They're in our development diplomas. We do it in our 4v4 or 7799 and our 1111. And we also introduce it in our national diploma. So yes, we do talk about autonomy supportive coaching practices. The other one that we've integrated is trauma informed coaching practices. So there's actually research done on, what things could trigger trauma as a coach. And sort of related to this a little bit, it's basically being a little bit more athlete centered and but just little things like, and I'm going off topic a little bit. So a lot of times as coaches, I've seen they bring the kids in front of them, they say, all right, take a knee. Well, there's actually been some research done, and that could be traumatic to some little kids, because the trauma, by the way, 60% of all children have experienced some sort of trauma before the age of 16. So trauma could be coming from an adult. It be coming from an adult figure at home or whatever, an authority figure. So that take a knee approach is actually a top-down approach. And so that might be like, and now all of a sudden there's this interference happening. Unplanned physical conditioning is traumatic, is actually considered traumatic now. And I would have to definitely fire myself if I go back in the 90s and 80s when I first started coaching, because when kids didn't do what I wanted, high school kids didn't do what I wanted, I said, all right, that's fine. Let's just get on the line. Let's just run. Right. And that wasn't planned. So the moment when Herb Brooks did it in the Miracle movie, that was definitely unplanned. So what they're basically saying is avoid that. Any type of conditioning should be planned physical conditioning. So stay away from, there's lots of things about traumatic informed, that's related to this theme. So that's another thing that we put in our courses as well.
No, I like it. I think introducing these kind of things into a session is good, because at the end of the day, the players are the ones that are on the field solving the problems. And it's good to create that kind of environment, that kind of learning environment in training, because it starts to set up the habits and their decision making.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times as coaches, we yell at them from the sideline during the game, and usually by the time we yell at them, it's already too late. So it's like, why are you yelling? Because they can't go back and fix it. They can't. It's like squirting toothpaste out of the tube. You can't put it back in. Now they can learn from it, but you're better off just not saying anything and then coaching the bench. In other words, coaching them when they come out and all that. Or like what you said, in practice, okay, now we create that environment for them to make mistakes, but so they can learn from them, by giving them some autonomy to do that, to explore, to learn, to get better, to fail, to struggle. So I think it's all part of the, youth coaching bit, and really what we're doing is we're teaching life lessons using a sports strategy. It's what we're doing as coaches. And someone told me that you really shouldn't measure success in youth sports as a coach until 20 years later, at the end of the day. So.
And somebody asked a question early in the presentation on how was the buy-in from the players and the buy-in from the parents. What's the buy-in or the feedback from other coaches that you're trying to implement this with in U.S. soccer?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many other coaches. I've heard some other coaches do it. Like, for example, that college coach in Michigan does it with his players. He said his players love it. They love it because they get a chance to just kind of breathe a little bit and say, okay, if I need to work on 1v1 defending, then I'm going to find the best dribbler and I'm going to work on just my footwork, you know? So the feedback I'm hearing is that it's favorable. You might have to you're going to have to be patient the first time or two you'd try it, you know, and you might have to say, because one time I had a kid just lay down. I just had a kid just lay down. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't planned. But I let him.
Maybe he was working on his diving technique.
Well, yeah, I think he was. He was on his back and he was like kind of looking at the clouds. I think he just wanted a break. So what I did is I just shortened the 10 minutes because the kids don't really know when 10 minutes is. So I just shortened it up a little bit. But he eventually got up on his own. And it's funny because his parents were like, get up, get up, get up. And it was actually brilliant because the kid was like, almost like, well, forget you. Coach said I can do whatever I want for 10 minutes as long as I don't stand and shoot in front of goal. So you do have to be mindful of you get every now and again you get those types of kids.
And it also teaches you a lot as a coach because you get to see how the thought processes of your players, right? What they want to work on, who do they engage with, who do they interact with, what do they want, what kind of tasks do they want to work on, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. No, exactly. And yeah, I'm going to continue doing this with the high school kids that I coach this fall. You know, and again, because we call eight to be great, right? Because I usually had like 8 minutes before activities, kind of, you know, I gave them 8 minutes in there. Yeah, it's funny to see what they come up with. So I've done it about 10 times, 12 times over the past 2 years, ever since I heard that high school coach met, you know, ever since I kind of read the book, that textbook, and by Wade Gilbert. And yeah, I've been trying to implement it whenever I can.
Perfect. Vince, thank you very much. It was
Thank
a
you.
very enjoyable presentation. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Good luck in your new role, and we look forward to seeing more U.S. soccer coaching diplomas and courses out there. Our next Behind the Bench will be on Wednesday, April the 6th at 3 p.m. It'll be Paolo Paccioni, who's the Director of Performance at Club America, and he's also the high performance fitness coach, and with Richard Bucciarelli. And if you'd like to become a member of the NSCAC, please visit our website at www.nscac.ca. There's also a package in there where you can not only get the Canadian NSCAC membership, but you can also get the U.S. soccer membership together. So looking forward to that continued partnership, Vince. Thank you very much. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.